With the rivalry between Sega and Nintendo heating up, the Game Gear would be released in the US in 1991, with an estimated price tag of over $150. Unlike the Nintendo's Game Boy, Game Gear had full color graphics and was the third commercially available color handheld console after the Atari Lynx and the Turbo Express. With this powerful new handheld, Sega was about to win the handheld wars. Almost.
What made the Game Gear so great in the 90s? It was one of the newest portable systems. It had a color screen to it.
The Game Gear. Back in the 90s, I think the only reason why the Game Gear was so good was because it had color screen. That's probably the only reason. I'm like, when you hold it, I'm like, God, you know? The directional pads over here, the buttons over here. You only had, what, 3 buttons? 3 buttons?
No, it was
2. What happened to the third? You know?
The most surprising about the Game Gear, I think the only thing I think is the color screen itself.
I was just surprised at how huge it was.
Battery life, I mean, even though the Game Gear has more batteries than the Game Boy, yeah, 2 more batteries extra than the Game Boy, the battery life was about like 3 hours, like way less than the Game Boy.
You had more batteries than what was ever needed. You had 3 on each side. Who in their right minds would want to pay for at least a half of 6 batteries, which cost you about $7, if not $8 a pack for 6 batteries?
And with that, Sega lost in the portable gaming market. Nonetheless, Sega still had the market on lock, but their fan base was soon in for some more non-fan service treatment.
Let me see that again.
Sega had the 3 systems. They had the Sega CD, they had the Sega, 32X, they had freaking Game Gear, they had the Nomad, which came out in the end of the Genesis life cycle, which was really bad because, it took as much power as the actual Game Gear, 6 batteries. Terrible. Like, I felt like Nintendo at that point was their strongest, and they had, a good lineup of games. They had the Super Nintendo, which had Donkey Kong, which had Color Instinct, which had Mario RPG, which had Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2, which had a whole bunch of games that were really good. Sega, on the other hand, they had a few good games, but they weren't as good as the classic games that Nintendo was releasing. So they had Vector Man, they had Vector Man 2, that's on the Sega side. Also they had on the Sega side, they had Sonic games, of course. They were really good, but besides the Sonic games, the other games were just alright. Sega, because of their unfortunate habits of making add-on after add-on after add-on, poor support for these add-ons led to a lot of people to lose faith in Sega's brand power and lasting strength. With this, Nintendo snuck in a last-minute victory with a powerful game lineup to the Super Nintendo and with the Game Boy Pocket, successor to the original brick-sized Game Boy. The Genesis was dying because of their needless add-ons, and Sega released one of the last Genesis games ever released in Ristar. It made a portable version of their popular Genesis called the Sega Nomad that played Sega Genesis games. But the Game Boy Pocket was smaller, played all the original Game Boy games, and only needed 2 batteries to power itself up, and had a long battery life on top of that. Versus the Sega Nomad, which needed 6 batteries and had a shorter battery life, and played none of the original Game Gear games. Where would this lead Sega?
Let's see, the Sega, what I like about the Sega Nomad, what is it, like a wannabe Sega Genesis thing, like a big Sega Genesis thing with screens? Yeah, I think it's like a portable version of it.
Sega Nomad I've never even heard of.
Yes, I have heard of the Sega Nomad. I also heard of the Sega Saturn and the other Sega enhancements. Sega Nomad wasn't really as popular as the Sega Saturn as people would have thought to appear. The Sega Nomad was technically a real downfall when it came out. It wasn't as popular as a Game Boy where you had easy controllable buttons, you had a directional pad.
The Game Boy Pocket was better than the Nomad. I
I don't want to walk around with something I can't even fit in my pocket and it's considered portable. I'd rather just go in my pocket, take it out, play Game Boy. Game Boy Pocket was way better than Nomad.
Did I ever heard of the Sega Nomad? Nope, never in my life.
With the failure of the Nomad and the success of the Game Boy Pocket, Nintendo's focus on quality over quantity was in full effect. Nintendo took their time with their systems, and although the Virtual Boy was released and was a complete and utter failure due to just being a bad product, like the Sega CD and the 32X, Nintendo made very few bad products and they barely made any rushed products. Heck, there wasn't even a Game Boy with actual color until October 21st, 1998, and even then it only took 2 batteries. Enter the Sega Saturn, in the works for almost 2 years. The Sega Saturn was a powerful machine for its time, but its design with 2 CPUs and 6 other processors made harnessing the power extremely difficult. Also, many of the parts in the system were off-shelf components, increasing the complexity of the system because the components were not made to work together. This, and a rush launch in the US with very few games, made the Saturn look worse in the eyes of true gamers, with the PlayStation out and the Nintendo 64 on the way. Well, what made the Saturn launch now a big deal is the simple fact that Saturn was just, it was rushed. It was like, it was supposed to be made to play 2D games, like Sonic and all that. But it rushed the 3D parts of the system too fast. Like, there was 3D parts and they just said, okay, we're just gonna rush and cram all this into this box and see how it goes.
Flaws in the Sega Saturn? First of all, too many Japanese titles, not enough US titles. I mean, that's good for certain people that enjoy stuff like that, especially nerds, but it's not gonna succeed in the US. Nobody's gonna buy stuff like Panzer Dragon, maybe a few people that appreciate it, but the mass people, they're like, what is this? I want basketball, I want football, I want NFL quarterback. You remember that game?
It was just hard to make games for it. Nobody wanted to make games for Saturn because, it's so hard to even think of making a game for it because PlayStation was right next to Saturn and it was so much easier to make a PlayStation game.
I think I remember a game called Bugs. Remember Panzer Dragon? No, they had Sonic 3D, which I hate that game. That game is garbage. The N64 is gonna seem better than any system because it was 64-bit. People's like, I must have this. Nothing is more powerful than N64. But of course, cartridges are $70 and you can get a CD for $40. You can't get CG graphics on the N64. It basically, you couldn't even hold a lot of space in the cartridge. It wasn't worth it. PlayStation 2 destroyed it when it came out. But it did have GoldenEye 007. That's reason alone to own the N64. Oh yeah, Ocarina of Time, Zelda, Glass Course, if you remember that, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario. I'm going to stop.
With Sega coming out of the gates with a sprained ankle, the Saturn limped through the first few months of its release in the US. With Saturn's surprise early launch, retailers felt betrayed because the system at first wasn't released to all outlets like KB Toys and Walmart. And because of this, those retailers left little shelf space and promotional products for Sega in their stores. With the PlayStation out with Crash Bandicoot and Tomb Raider, and plus Nintendo around the corner with Nintendo 64 and Super Mario 64, Sega needed a few killer games to release around the same time as Nintendo 64. So they started working on 2 new games that would push the very limit of the Sega Saturn. Nice into Dreams, and none other than the blue-haired mascot himself, Sonic the Hedgehog, making his full 3D debut in Sonic Extreme. But would that be enough for the once powerful company known as Sega to take back the gaming throne?